When I was a kid, I loved watching animated series. When you're young, you're impressionable, and for me, the shows that I watched led to these colorful, fantasy-filled experiences that, in a way, shaped up my childhood. I loved watching shows like Dragon Ball, Detective Conan, Batman, the animated series. These take up for a large portion of my early memories, actually. But then, I grew old. And as you grow old, you run into the stigma that these animated shows are for kids. And you, like a phase, have to move on and start enjoying more mature content through live action. But naturally, as time has passed, this sort of prejudice has diminished, even though not completely, because it still very well exists when you're referring to Japanese animation. You know, if you watch anime, you are a weeb. Or people like to throw ayaya emotes at you on Twitch, amongst many other things, right? And I feel like with time, that will also diminish. Because the reality is, animation will eventually, in my opinion, become the premier form of storytelling. Because unlike live action, animation has no limits. Regardless of how weird the story you want to tell is, animation can do it. You know, you can go from your standard basic, slice of life flick, or you could portray this crazy world with magical girls and very deep philosophical questions, really, in Magica Madoka. Or you could portray a story of humans, flying around with these devices that propel gas as they have swords and face off against gonadless giants that are trying to eat them. The possibilities are actually endless, and it's really fascinating as a medium. And I do believe that we've only really scratched the surface. So what is this intro and this ramble all about? Like, what am I trying to do? What is this video even? Well, I mean, you have seen the title, so you know what we're here to do. We're here to talk about Arcane. I was actually compelled to make this video after watching the second batch of the 3 episodes. Like, we're getting 3 episodes every week, and we got episodes 4, 5, and 6 on Saturday, which is when I'm recording this. Like, as soon as I got done watching it, I really wanted to make this video because I'm gonna make a case for Arcane as a groundbreaking animated series that will set a very strong precedence for future animations to come. Who am I to say this? Well, I am Miguel. I call myself Mogwai in the internet, and I am a card game YouTuber with 0 credentials regarding storytelling and reviews, but I have a YouTube channel and an opinion. So I'm going to share it with you guys, and I'm going to do my very best to express why I feel like this show is, I believe, ultimately going to end up being something very special, at least regarding storytelling. It is truly something else, and hopefully I can express myself properly in this video. So without further ado, let's jump into it. Throughout my lifetime, I've watched many different animated shows. Particularly lately, I've been watching a lot of anime, right? Japanese animation, because I do believe that overall, in general, Japanese animation is a bit of a next level regarding not necessarily storytelling, but the actual animation itself. They put a lot of work into it, and the quality is outstanding, especially in specific titles. Though I do feel like sometimes the quality of the animation itself carries certain shows from a writing perspective. There's a lot of really good stuff out there. For me personally, the ones that have impacted me the most, the ones that have inspired me the most, are the likes of Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, Attack on Titan, Mob Psycho 100, and Haikyuu. I hold Haikyuu perhaps in the highest of regards comparing to the others, because even though it is a sports anime and that tends to get a little bit less attention in general, I feel like the storytelling in that show is absolutely phenomenal, and it's done a lot of great things. But I felt something a bit different with Arcane. Not necessarily, because one of the reasons why I really enjoyed Attack on Titan specifically was the premise itself. I do feel like the show is lacking in regards to characters in a way. This is just my opinion. And even though I really enjoy anime in general, I am very picky with it. Through my experience, I probably have enjoyed like 5% of the anime that I've watched, because I do feel like a lot of them, since they are aimed at younger audiences sometimes, or just in general, they tend to sacrifice some aspects of dialogue for over the top, reactions and expressions that try to kind of like strong arm you into, getting the emotion out yourself, right? I feel like sometimes they try to force it out of you with these characters just yelling their lungs out and be super over the top and just behaving a little bit unnaturally. Obviously, this is just my opinion, and I'm not trying to say that this is a wrong way to portray storytelling or anything like that. It's just how I personally feel. It can be a little bit tedious and it can be a little bit obnoxious at times, and that's pretty cheeky coming from someone like me who gets a little bit over the top in my own videos as well. But that is legitimately how I've felt. So there's a lot of Japanese anime out there that just really isn't up to par in quality, I believe, with some of these other ones that I've mentioned, like Full Metal, etc. So Arcane is very different from Japanese animation in the sense that it has a completely different style of animation to begin with. It is a style that combines 3D figures and covers them in colored painting. I don't know exactly how you label this animation style, if it does have a specific label or not. If it does, I am unaware of it, but I just want to say that as somebody who's been watching animated shows for pretty much their entire life, I wouldn't really expect all that much from this style of animation, considering we've had, some issues with CGI being imported onto Japanese animation, for example, and it looking out of place and a little bit dull or a little bit weird. I don't really care as much as other people have expressed their opinions on that, but because of this, I wasn't really expecting what ultimately met my eyes when I opened up that first episode, and that is this gorgeous scene of Piltover with just so much life everywhere. And then you go to the underground city and it's just more of that, so much detail. The fluidity of the movements looks so neat. The fight choreography is fantastic, and I can say this as someone with fighting experience. I have competed in mixed martial arts quite a long time ago. Like that's well past me, but I am knowledgeable of combat to a certain extent. And I do like it when shows portray it well. And I gotta say, Arcane portrays combat super realistically, which is not something that you would expect from an animated show, especially coming from like a video game on top of that. So just everything about the visuals was absolutely stunning. And that is definitely one of the big perks of the show, but not its strongest point, because its strongest point goes beyond that. But before we get to that, let's talk about the soundtrack as well. Absolutely loved it. Not really surprised, since it's coming from Riot. Riot as a company has been very successful in music. Like, I feel like in a certain way, Riot is a video game and a music producing company, and now they are just a general production company, right? Like, they do everything apparently. But the soundtrack was absolutely stellar. I loved the Enemy song. I also love the other songs as well. I believe they're labeled as Playground, and I'm not sure what the other names were. But overall, the music in the show, the soundtrack is really fitting, and it never feels like it takes over the scene, which is also important. So I really appreciate that. But I'm segueing here into what I believe is the strongest aspect of Arcane, and the reason why it will go down in the history books as one of the greatest animations, at least of our current age, and that is the writing. The writing is, TLDR, spectacular. Absolutely spectacular. And I'm going to try to do my best and explain why I feel that way. So we can divide writing into several elements, right? You have the overall premise, you have the plot, the environment where the plot takes in, and then you have the characters and their dialogues. And I'm going to emphasize a lot of my points on the characters themselves, the dialogues, because ultimately a story revolves around the characters. And a lot of very, proficient writers have said that the most important aspect of your story is the characters themselves, more so than the plot, because at the end of the day, the story does revolve around them, right? And I feel like Arcane absolutely excels in this. And I think the best way I can actually explain why I feel it's so good is by just diving into the individual characters themselves and the different perspectives, right? Because the show does portray very differing perspectives, and there's several things going on, right? Like you got all the plot happening in the upper city with the council and the Hextech discovery and all that, and then you have the underground or the undercity, the future Zon, to put it in a way. Well, I mean, it's what it's actually going to be. And you have all the conflict happening there, you know, with the disparity in wealth and status between both aspects of the city, and the struggles that people go through, and how they, you know, in Vander's words, how they have to, you know, what was the actual expression that he says? They had to earn their place in the world, I believe is what he told Vi, or what Vi told that she told him, right? And I'm going to start off by focusing on Vi and Jinx, or Vi and Powder, depending on, you know, what point of the story we're referring to. I really, really, really liked how the pacing and the development of this relationship was handled, because you got to keep in mind that this is based off of a video game. We have these characters that have their lore backgrounds and everything, and because of this, we know, you know, they give us point A, we know what point B is. We know where that character ends. Not exactly what they're doing, but how they are going to be portrayed, how they're going to end up like, right? With Powder, we know she will eventually become Jinx. The question is, how does this happen? And the way that they start off the show by showing this group of friends, you know, getting into Jace's apartment and stealing these Hextech balls. I don't remember how, like the orbs, I'm going to call them the blue orbs, right? Because I'm not exactly sure what the term is. But the blue orbs that hold a lot of magical power and can be very dangerous, as we know as we watch the show. That beginning really establishes, you know, the camaraderie and the relationship between this group of 4 characters, right? We got Vi, we got Powder, and then we got Milo and Clagor, and they're very good friends, you know, and they also fight between each other, and they have a pretty organic relationship represented through dialogue. Because the thing about this show is that regarding dialogue, it never feels like it drags anything out. And this is something that a lot of animes that I've watched, and animated shows in general, have been guilty of, right? Like substituting, you know, good dialogue with over-the-top expressions and reactions, and dragging out certain scenes of like staring at each other and stuff like that, that makes it feel like it can be a bit tedious to watch through at times. Obviously, it differs greatly from show to show. I'm just like generalizing here. But Arcane excels at giving you the impression that you're never really wasting your time watching it, in the sense that there is no time wasted. Every aspect of dialogue, every scene, every character, you know, that's relatively relevant, especially if it's tied to other, if they have ties to other characters that are, you know, the main characters of the show. Nothing is extra. Everything has a reason. Like, even, like, for example, at the very beginning of, I'm not sure if this, I believe this is episode 1 actually, in which there's a bartender in Vander's bar, and he sits down with a couple of, you know, shady looking guys, right? Well, a guy and a woman. And he's going to be ripped off, but Vander comes in to save him. And you think that the point of the scene is to show us, you know, who Vander is and how he's a commanding presence, and, you know, his role as a leader in that area, at least of the Undercity, and all that, right? But then later in the story, we see this very character that felt like that was the last time we were going to see him, and he helps out Caitlyn find a way to, you know, give him that chemical that will help Vi recover faster, right? And we even see, like, you know, we get a little bit of intel as to what that guy has been through and why he ended up the way he ended up, like, and it feels like a very minor detail, but it's really important, because it feels like everything that we see in the show will ultimately lead to something. And something that the show does really well is that it really lets us know, or it reminds of essentially the one of the basic rules of the universe, and that is that actions have consequences, right? And the show does an excellent job at portraying that. So back to the relationship between Vi and Powder, we see a very natural, you know, sort of raw sibling relationship, right? A lot of love, a lot of appreciation, but a lot of, you know, stress and conflict as well at certain times. More so portrayed in the music video with I what was the name of the song? Not My Enemy? I think it's Not My Enemy. Correct me if I'm wrong. But we see some scenes in which Vi and Powder are in the room and they're actually fighting, not getting along, right? Because we don't see that too much of that in the actual show, I believe, until, things go south, right? But we have a very nice, sort of friendship and really good dialogue to back that up and build up these relationships between the characters. As the story progresses, we see that Powder, she is a Jinx. Like, I really love how they took that name and they took, because that wasn't really a part of the original lore of the character, in case you're wondering. But they actually incorporated that. And there's a lot of things that the writers have done, taking the source material, which is just all over the place, right? And actually making it so compelling and so human. Emphasis on that, so human. The relationships between these characters, as they go on, we're introduced to Vander. Vander is an exceptional character. I really love how they portrayed him. It's like the older version of them, essentially, right? One that is backed up, has been through a lot, and has gathered experience and wisdom. He represents wisdom, because at his core, Vander is the same as Vi, right? And he's a scrapper. He's a very strong man that is respected for his prowess in combat and has been at the, front lines of rebellions in the past against the upper city. But as time passed and he's gathered experience, he's experienced loss, right? He's experienced loss of those close to him, and he's experienced the pain of losing people, and ultimately is toned down and is in a position where he is kind of like the bridge between the upper and the under city. And his relationship with the female enforcer, I really like the voice actress for that character, by the way, is very good. I really like the dialogue between them. I really like the intensity of the conversations. And I love how, because a lot of times the story is about differing, like, wills clashing, right, against each other. And I really like how it was portrayed with Vander and everything, like his relationship with every character, essentially. There are some points that I didn't quite agree with. Like, I think they went a little bit overboard trying to early on let us know how much of a badass he is. Like that, I wasn't a big fan of the scene where he was in the bar and he was talking with like the girl, like the one that the woman who eventually sides with Soko, right? Like the one that wants actual rebellion and conflict. I feel like they went a bit too much with like the puffing of the pipe in between every line and him saying that he's not afraid. I think, they could have taken a bit of more laid back approach towards that scene. And you don't need to really convince me that he's a badass, especially how he's going to, live up to that later, when everything goes to shit, essentially, in episode 3, right? But I really like Vander as a character and how they progressed him, and I do know the theories behind his potential identity, but I'm not going to dwell too much on that. I'm going to focus on what's to be seen up until now, right, in this video. So going back to Vi and Jinx, we see this dynamic, and we see Vi defending her a lot, despite Milo really calling him out. The character of Milo very well portrayed, because we've all met a Milo in our lives. Somebody who maybe sometimes speaks a little bit too much and likes to brag, etc., etc. It was really well portrayed. And the thing is, we see certain patterns from Powder. She's like this innocent looking girl, right? And she behaves that way. But there are some moments in which, like, for example, when she was denied following Vi and Milo and Clagor to save Vander from Soko, when Vi told her that she's not ready, we see a scene of her in the room and she's just like crying and super upset. And that's a human reaction. That's a normal human reaction, right? But the way she's crying, her mannerisms, the way she's freaking out over the robot monkey in the floor as well, and just her expressions, her movement, it's creepy. There's something about it that's creepy. And we see, like, at that point, that was the first time in the show that I saw a little bit of Jinx, of what I perceive Jinx to be as a character, at least. And I was a bit creeped out by her crying. It's supposed to be a sad scene for her, but, the way they did it, it kind of like, it really starts giving you in, like, hey, there's something, this girl is a little bit disturbed. And, you start to believe that maybe if she's pushed in a certain direction, maybe Jinx could make sense out of her, right? Because, I knew, like I said, point A to B, but I didn't know what would happen in between. And I was really, really intrigued to see how Powder would go from Powder to Jinx. How this loving sister, relationship would end up just like backfiring and they become enemies. That's super interesting, right? And I knew it was going to happen in the first few episodes because we're not going to see the entire story being, portraying them as kids, because we see the intro how they're adults, right? So I was definitely expecting that sort of like conflict to eventually climax at the end of the first 3 episodes. And I was right about that, but I was not right about what would happen, because I was not expecting that episode 3 finale to call it in a way. Oh my God, man, that was something else. It starts off with a very standard sort of approach, like a very standard storytelling, trope, I guess is how you label it, or how you reference it. Character A tells character B not to come. Character B doesn't come, but then they decide to come anyways, and they end up saving the day, right? But it turns out they flipped that on its head, and we got one of the most dramatic scenes I've ever seen in any animated show, period. Because sometimes some animated shows go like gore, full-on gore, and just a lot of screaming, a lot of suffering, a lot of this. But this hit you different, because I connected with Milo. I connected with Claire. They were also succeeding in their mission, which is a very important reason to know that's why that scene is so devastating. They were succeeding. They were struggling, but eventually they were coming out on top, and they managed to close the door. Clagor is there smashing the wall, getting those bricks out. Milo, being coached by Vander, is able to overcome his anxiety and pick through the locks and everything. And they're coming together as a team. They're going to do it. And then Jinx comes in and blows them away. Like, oh my God, the raw emotion after that, when she confronts her sister and she realizes what happened, then she's just like crying and sobbing, reacting in a very raw way that is very real, especially for a girl of that age, like that desperation, that uncontrolled emotion. Like I was just blown back. I was absolutely blown back. I fell in love at that point. Like that was the point. I was really liking the show. I was loving everything, but that point was just like, wow. This shit's legit. And then, I was, it even progresses more after that. Like, obviously, the 4 episodes 4, 5, and 6, we get to see Jinx, who is older now, but there's still some elements of powder in her. Like, they didn't just completely go turbo, like her just maniac mode, which is what I was expecting. But, they know what they're doing, and there's still some remnants of very, very prevalent remnants of humanity within her, the way she behaves and everything. But I love like when you start like, because the first time you see the corpse of Milo, like that she's visualizing, it's so like sudden that you kind of think, did I just imagine that to a certain extent? I don't know. And then it keeps on going, and I love that sort of like analogy, that image of her carrying the dead corpses on her back, as she's also having to argue with them, and she's clearly traumatized by that event, which is not surprising at all. And it's just the way Jinx becomes Jinx, especially that 6th episode where she finally meets Vi, and it's kind of heartwarming at first. You're expecting something bad to happen, but you're not sure how it's gonna happen, and you see that certain paranoid elements of her like start surfacing, and she's losing her mind, and it shows her interacting with the dead Milo and Clagor in her mind, and she just starts distrusting her as soon as she sees the Enforcer. And I just felt like the way they wrote that transition was believable, and it was very well done. And I was just a big fan of Powder's character development over the span of only 6 episodes. Even though they're 40 minutes each, it was very impressive, very inspiring, and just very, very well done. And that interaction was just really strong. I love, Vi. Like, I wasn't sure. I thought at first, like, Vi was going to be taken in by Marcus, and he was going to, turn her into an enforcer, right? Because you do know Vi ends up as an enforcer. Again, A to B. You don't know the middle, but you know the destination. But no, Marcus, staying true to this character, has some issues, but it still, like, does not hesitate to just throw her in a cell, which is what happens. But it's Caitlyn that gets her out, and that establishes how, the beginning of that relationship begins. And I really gotta tip my imaginary hat off to the writers, because that is just very well done. I'm gonna say very well done a lot throughout this video, but I really do feel quite strongly about it, man. Like it's just so well narrated, and I really like that aspect of the story. And then we go to the Piltover, right? The council, the discovery of Hextech, Jace. At first, I wasn't like Jace was perhaps one of the least interesting characters to me. It was a bit more generic, but as the story progresses, I've really fallen to really like him. But Victor is where most of my attention goes there, because Victor is just such a compelling character, like from the way he's written. Because all we know from Victor prior to this, in case you're wondering, is that he's just this very generic robot guy with like a Russian accent that likes to augment his body. Like it's nothing new under the sun, like a video game villain in a way, right? But they take this guy who's crippled. You see he's pale, he looks weak, but he has this sly look in his face. There's something about his face that you see that he's conniving, and his will, like his major, like what motivates him is to leave a mark on the world, right? You can clearly tell that with the character. Like he wants to have an impact. He wants to create something that changes the way life is lived and progresses society. And you can see the ambition behind that. And then you realize, like at the beginning of the first, I believe it's episode 4, you start noticing that he looks even more pale after the time skip. And then you notice that he's sick. So, because you assume that, he's just carrying a cane because he's crippled as a kid. But no, it turns out that he's also like actually terminally ill. He's dying. And you have this character with so much unparalleled, like so much ambition. And so little time, and you realize like the fact that they show this after Heimerdinger tells him that a decade will fly by super fast is very neat. The fact that they order it that way as well, and I just love that the beginning of episode 6 with Victor, as a kid meeting Singed, I assume he's Singed, and rejecting him at first. But then at the end of the episode, going full circle and coming back and being like, hey, I finally understand. I just think that was so well done. You also know that he's already hiding something from Heimerdinger as well, already showing certain elements of his character. Like he's not against deceiving, for personal gain, which makes sense considering, again, where B is. And I really like how they handled Victor as a character. One of the highlights for me, for sure. Heimerdinger was also super fun to watch all the time. I almost cried. Like I almost cried when they like voted to kick him off the council. Like I was that face, that puppy face. Oh my god, dude, that was actually my heart was like in pain. I never have felt that way for just like a puppy face before. Not ever since I watched Shrek and the Puss in Boots have I felt that way. And that was more of a naturally like a funny reaction, right? So it was very well animated as well. And I like the Medarta character a lot. I really like the inclusion of that character because of the card J Medarta in the Legends of Runeterra card game. So I was already a little bit familiar with that last name. And I like how they portrayed her a lot. I like the ambitious element of the character and her interactions with Jace, as well as overall, like, Caitlyn being tied to the family, like her mother being a member of the council, and her, just the fact that she's like, I really like that scene where she was like competing against the female enforcer that ultimately died later, right? Like that flashback was also, very interesting. And I just gotta say, like, what's really amazing about the show is that nothing feels dragged out. Every single character is interesting. Every single scene is compelling. And it is also very easy to watch as well. And it also has a lot of like rewatchability as well. Like I've actually rewatched episode 1, and I feel like I'm going to run it over again eventually entirely. Because there's also a lot of little Easter eggs here and there for the more, passionate fans of the lore of League of Legends, and a lot of, minor details, and just excellent writing, excellent dialogue, exceptional everything. And it really does show that, cartoons don't have to be about just like a guy like yelling and all these over the top reactions and this and that and all just like, crazy fights and stuff. Like, no, you can have a more realistic approach You know, I like it when you can mix realism with fantasy and it blends in well. And I feel like Arcane did that better than anything that I've watched regarding animation. And it's only, you know, the very beginning of the show, and I'm already so drawn in that I felt the need to make this video and share you guys, you know, my thoughts. I think it sets, what I mean by it setting a strong precedent for animation to come is that I think it really upped the bar in writing dialogue and pacing of a story and connecting everything. I love how everything is connected. Like all these characters, all these lines, all these plot lines, all these perspectives, very differing perspectives, by the way, each character with their own individual struggles. Victor with the illness, Vi, you know, and everybody in the underground city, you know, with the inequality and the poor quality of life and the envy and resentment towards those in the upper city. The Silco's ambition. I love Silco as a character. Great voice actor, by the way, but also just some very neat lines. I love Marcus too. Like I really like the character of Marcus, how it's developed. Like now you start seeing that he's not just this bad, corrupt cop, you know, like he's actually human and he feels remorse in some of his actions, but he's also, you know, it conflicts with the fear of him being too deep, and there's still some elements of him that, you know, stay there, and even though we see more human aspects of him, or at least more empathetic aspects of him, because, you know, egotistical tendencies are very human too. I really like what they did with Marcus as a character, and I love the scene with Silco where, you know, we see him imagining, like fantasizing about just blowing himself up with Silco, and Silco like actually gives him the opening. I love that scene so much, and I could just stay here rambling for hours because there's everything about the show is great. So I think we've gone at a proper length, and yeah, I've communicated, you know, what I feel about it. I think it's a masterpiece. I think it's really that good. I wasn't expecting it to be by any stretch of the imagination. You know, as even though I cover a Riot game, I don't have huge ties with Riot. It's not like I've ever played League of Legends before or anything like that. I'm just a guy who likes card games that ended up in Legends of Runeterra. But super impressed. And as someone who's working on their own story, you know, like my own project, I found it just absolutely unbelievably inspiring. And I have nothing but admiration for the creators of the show. And I cannot wait to see how the story continues to develop. And that's where I'm going to end this video at. Thank you guys for watching. Let me know what you think. It's fine to disagree with me, you know? Like, I feel very strongly about my opinions, but it's just my own perspective. Just one limited perspective, right? So if you have anything to input, you know, any criticisms that you would like to point out, or if you agree, whatever, let me know in the comment section down below. I also love the formatting of the show, by the way, like the fact that it's 3 episodes, like every week. It gives you time to actually absorb and discuss the show with others, and I think it's a great way to deliver it. I'm not as big of a fan of just like the entire show being available to you immediately. Though for a lot of shows I do like that, but I'm happy that they approached it for this one this way. I think they've just done everything right. It's just crazy, like everything right. And it's just no surprise to me whatsoever that it is as popular as it is. And I know it's cool to be edgy. I know it's very tempting to be different. Believe me, I'm a Spaniard who proclaims to all directions that I don't like football, soccer for American viewers, and I'm pretty much one of the few Spaniards who doesn't. And I like to feel special about that. But sometimes I wonder, why don't I like football? Is it because I like being different? Or is it because I don't like the game? Or maybe an odd mix of both, right? And I know there will be some opinions right there from people who actually just don't want to agree with the masses. That's always going to happen. You know, people want to feel special. They want to feel unique. They want to be the protagonist of their own story in a way. But there's also going to be a lot of very solid criticism as well. And just because you don't like the show, I'm not putting you in that basket. You know, everybody's different. And I'm curious to see what you guys think. And that's where I'm going to end it at, because I had a lot to say. It was raw. I didn't script this, so hopefully it was watchable. And I really hope you enjoyed it. And at least you know my perspective, the random card game guy, and my opinion and all that. But yeah, really, really excited for the future of this. And I also believe, you know, hopefully this will be a wake up call to people like future animation productions, man. Like they gotta step it up. They gotta step it up because it's gonna be hard to, you know, fill in the shoes of something like this, and that's always a great thing because, yeah, maybe this is a big turning point, and animation gets respected more and more and more as a medium. And I just love what they did. I'm gonna stop talking because I'm going on tangents and rambling at this point. So yeah, thank you guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Leave a like if you did, or not. Do whatever you want. Love ya. And I'll see you guys around.